Hello, and welcome to this new day, to a time of devotional. This is part two of two videos I am doing for you and with you, inviting us to look at anxiety, reacting and responding to anxiety in us and around us. And for our role model in this, I have chosen Job. Job had more than anxiety. Job had grief, illness, and many other complicated factors. However, Job, like so many of us, had friends who wanted to help. They really did. But instead of coming to him and listening and helping him explore his emotions, his truth, his theology, and framework for understanding what had happened, they got caught in his feelings, his experiences, and began to feel anxious. They began to feel that they were threatened by his feelings, his reality, his theology. And instead of saying, "Oh, Job, I need to take a break and take a walk and sort through the difference between what you're feeling and going through and what I'm feeling and going through," and then returning to be present to Job's sense of what was happening without imposing their stuff on the situation. Instead, they sat around and invited him to debate the theology that he was using to express what was happening to him within and around him. So, a quick review. Job finds itself near the middle of our Holy Scripture library. It is in the tradition we call wisdom because it's not a story that is to tell about a piece of history. It is a story to illuminate how hard it is to talk about our amazingly huge God and how easy it is to get stuck in our human way of looking at things and asking God to do the same. So we're not sure if there was once a man with three friends who debated theology. Historically, though, there has always been people like Job, good people, trying their best to support themselves and their families. He had a good farm, and he was an upstanding citizen in both his religious and other communities. And bad things happened to him. In the frame of the story, it was because the gods had a bet. Could Job stay faithful to Yahweh, his God, even if all the material blessings and the family emotional supports he had were gone? So everything is taken away from Job. His children and partner, his land dies, which means his animals die. And then he gets very, very sick and begins to live a time of chronic illness, pain, and grief. And so while there may not have been one historical Job, that's because there is always a Job. There is always someone in our life, in the world, in unbearable pain, trying to decide if God had anything to do with it. One of the aspects of anxiety is that we are often not aware of when we get anxious, how much we get anxious, and what of our four responses we normally take. Kathleen Smith, who's written a wonderful book called Everything Isn't Terrible, notes that there are four usual ways that our instincts respond when we are threatened or we imagine that we are or are going to be threatened. We can freeze. Just like an image on a computer screen, we can stop. Stop thinking, stop moving. Usually, it means stopping breathing. We can fight. We can immediately resist pushing back, punching, or perhaps denying. We can flee. If you've ever seen a mouse run from a hawk, fleeing means just that, getting out of the way. Sometimes we are already miles away before we've realized what was threatening us. Or we can take all the energy of fleeing and all the energy of fighting and freeze into fretting. Fretting is when we think we're doing something and acting, but we are really truly just going around in circles trying to find a solution so as we can survive. Ruminating is a one word for that. So you are going to take note after part 1, if you could, of the times you noticed yourself becoming anxious. Anxious can be a physical feeling that's also emotional, and that's also mind. Your brain can begin to freeze, fight, flee, or fret, and then your body may or may not follow, depending on how you respond. Usually, our body will do something first. So you may, as I've experienced, get what feels like a literal squirt of adrenaline in your belly. And it's literally your stomach making sure that it doesn't need anything from you so you can respond to the threat. For other people, it's the breath. Immediately stop breathing. Heart rate can go up or down. Our mind can blank or begin frenetically to work. You may have emotions tied into this. Anxiety itself is like an emotion, but it's more a combination of different ones. There is the fear for survival and getting control back, while also feeling that we have no control, and so frustration and anger, sadness, all of that can be in the bucket of anxiety. All of that is why anxiety feels so uncomfortable and makes us want to immediately get to a new emotion, a new physical state, a new place. So the goal was to just notice, when is it that you feel this movement? Now, some of us may notice it when we are here. Others of us don't notice it until we are like over here. The other day, I had walked across the apartment and back again. And then I realized I was actually walking out because I wanted to flee the task that was making me feel anxious. It was an interaction that was an imagined threat, not a real threat. And my body had me walking to get rid of some of that uncomfortable anxiety. And I was walking before I noticed it. And that is okay. The goal at the very beginning of any practice is notice. So perhaps you've had a chance to do that. Perhaps it's a task you're going to give yourself for one day this week coming up, to notice. Today, I want to talk a little bit about how was it that Job stayed with his feelings, his conversation with God and his friends about why do good things happen to bad people and why do bad things happen to good people. He didn't get caught up in trying to fix his friends. He didn't say to the one, "Oh, it sounds like you're really worried about that, and you're making me feel more worried, and you need to." They would give him an idea, a solution, try and fix him, and he would think, "Yeah, no, I'm still going to need to wrestle with this." You're wanting to deny feelings or make this about a black and white God, a retribution type God. It doesn't fit. He stayed. Murray Bowen is someone who discovered that how humans are is hugely impacted by how they are in relationship with each other. He found that even if someone's personality, for example, had them generally being on the quiet side, whenever their family got anxious, they would burst out. They would become perhaps the clown to make everyone laugh. When the family system was doing okay, they would then go into their more comfort place, sitting back and observing. We can't peg this person as clown or reserved, but we do know that where and they go in that reacting is based on how the family unit's doing. And even those of us who grow up in excellent homes or good enough homes or horrendous homes, we all learned that system way of being. We also learned, as we talked about last time, how to respond to the alarm of anxiety. In some homes, when the fire alarm goes off, everyone exits the building. As I said yesterday, when the fire alarm goes off in my home, everyone comes to the kitchen and helps Lee remember she shouldn't cook. We don't flee very fast or freeze because we know that most alarms are false alarms. We still get up and go check, but our heart rate doesn't go up until we realize there's an actual fire. So those are some of the things that make up who we are. And becoming an adult, and I would name, especially if one wants to be a mature Christian, we're called to do something called differentiation, which is a Murray Bowen term for remembering that while we are part of the system, we are our own independent self as well. So while I may be part of a family that calls on me to be the clown when we are feeling anxious, I have the choice, once I'm mature enough, to become the clown or not, depending on the situation and my core values. So differentiation is the fancy term for becoming what I believe is a mature Christian. There are marks of these. These are things that Paul talks about. The people who do not go to bed angry, but work it out. Not afraid of conflict, dive right in. These are the people who would sit with Job and hear and believe all of his feelings without immediately wanting Job to stop feeling so deeply because we don't want to feel deeply. Who might want to stop Job from questioning God because we are afraid of God. Mature Christians make great spiritual friends. They do not seek to fix. They trust that the solutions have been seeded in us by God and our experiences in life and will come to fruition if we are supported and inspired to use them. Becoming more differentiated is a goal, and Kathleen Smith has these wonderful activities in her book, Everything Isn't Terrible, to help us do this. And you've already done the first step. Notice, anxiety moves you to react. The call to be differentiated, to be mature, calls you to respond instead. So, how do I know which is happening for me? Well, Kathleen Smith and Murray Bowen and many other people who use family systems theory talk about curiosity. Curiosity as the antidote to anxiety. So instead of freezing or running away, when we sense anxiety, to ask, what's up? Is this a true threat? And if so, what would be an appropriate response given who I am, what I value, my resources at hand? Being curious is the quality of good journalists. And Kathleen Smith asks you to ponder what kind of journalist your anxiety is. Is your anxiety the kind of journalist who mostly wants attention, wants people to click on their story online or buy newspapers? In which case, you don't really need a great article. You need a great headline. These are the journalists who hear about a story, pick the most scary, surprising, amazing thing in it, put it in bold, and then run with it. Fire alarm goes off in Lee's apartment. And the headline could say, Lee starts fires. Run for your lives. Or you could help your anxiety become a better journalist. Kathleen Smith calls our anxiety a constant, necessary, always present friend. One of those friends who frets so much. Their heart is in the right place, but oh my gosh. How can we make anxiety a better journalist? The fire alarm goes off when Lee is in the kitchen. Who's Lee? What's she doing? What time of day is it? Are there any other sources of smoke other than the toaster? In a small amount of time, the headline goes from Lee starts fires to false alarms are frequent at Lee's house. Oh, I have a different reaction to that headline. I also know that I can read past the headline to find out, why is it? How can you tell who's talking? Your anxiety, your reactivity, or your more mature responder? Notice that we call first responders not the first to react, but the first to respond. They are the people who not only come, but also make sure that everything in the situation is safe before they enter it. And then once getting there, analyze to see what response is needed. We want to respond. We are physically made to react. So, I'm going to give you a few modern day examples, and then we'll look at Job. You get a text. You hear the noise of the text. Reacting means you pick up your phone. Responding might mean asking yourself, what am I doing at the moment? Am I doing something I promised myself I would do, or I promised my church I would do? In which case, I need to get it done and not go check my phone. Perhaps you are in a face-to-face, real-time conversation with someone, and that is more important than checking your phone. That would be a response. It actually asks the question, is this a good time, according to who I am and what I need to do to respond to that text? React, respond. Notice that the reaction took a lot quicker. But the responding didn't take that much longer. Now, let's say that both of those situations you've decided or you've reacted and picked up your phone and you check and it's a text from, I want you to put in the blank there, the person who texts you whose name brings you anxiety. Now, this might, well, it's always changing, perhaps in your life, who that is. Often it is the youngest member of the family. Are they okay? Or it's the oldest person in the family. Are they okay? Perhaps it's a friend that you're in the midst of a conflict with. Perhaps it's your spouse and you know what you asked them to do and they're maybe texting you about that. Even before we've opened the text, our anxiety might be getting high. Our alarm is going off. The reaction would be to press on it because that will get rid of the anxiety that I'm in the moment having. Yes, it's going to lead to more anxiety because then I'm going to read the text, but at least I've gotten rid of. The responding would say, what am I doing right now? Am I 2 minutes away from leaving the house? So thus know that this is not the time to look at this text. Or perhaps, again, I'm in a face-to-face meeting. I had to make sure it wasn't my youngest child needing something. And now that I know it's not, I'm not going to look at what is in the text because I am choosing not to. Then there's the content of the text. When you react, you respond immediately. The other day, I responded so quickly that at the end of my response, I had to send an apology response because my reaction was so badly misspelled. Oh, so badly misspelled. That's when I noticed I was feeling anxious and reacting to get rid of the anxiety. Trying to fix the situation so quickly, I couldn't even spell the solution. One of the pieces of wisdom that letter writing used to give us was that we couldn't respond to an email in 2 seconds. With a letter, you had to write it out. You had to put it in the envelope. You had to put the address on and the stamp and then put it in the box. I am not saying people haven't written unsmart letters, but it gave us that time to let our anxiety settle enough for us to be curious. Again, curiosity. Why am I reaching for the phone so fast? Wonder what that's about. The hard thing with curiosity as a way to dampen our anxiety so we can respond is that it is very human to blame others for our anxiety and choices. I had to check my texts because so-and-so always texts me and bugs me, and then I feel mad. It's their fault. As we grow, I challenge you, as I challenge myself, to remember I have a choice whether to check my texts or not, a choice about when, if I respond, a choice about the content I use to respond. I can't choose who texts me, but I can choose my response. It's difficult because one of the best ways to get rid of anxiety is to put it on somebody else. The quick fix, I'll fix that, then she won't text me again. Well, you can't fix or change anyone else. And the person who loves to text you will text you anyways. But you can choose how and when to respond. I can choose on my holidays to turn my notifications off. Or if you'd like more, a less modern day example, you unplug the phone. We can choose how often to watch the news, if that is anxiety producing. These are all the ways we learn to respond rather than react. Job's friends definitely blamed Job for their anxiety. Job was in their face saying, God has made horrible things happen to me, and I'm not a bad person. One said, no, you're wrong. You must be a bad person. Look what's happening. And then the third one said, yeah, and you're doing all your feelings wrong, and I don't want to go there. So, yeah, you're wrong. Yeah, friend number 3, same thing. They wanted to blame Job for the fact that there is a hard question in the world as someone who is a believer in God. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why is there evil in the world? Why do people hoard money when everyone has need of a little bit? It is so normal to look and be like, there's enough for all, but instead we're going to have 2 people have all of it and they can choose how it gets doled out. Why? As a Christian, I believe that there is a holy, whole, divine love that holds everything in a gentle hold, so everything has choice, within a system of creation and season, so everything has a season. Everything is born and dies, and the energy is born and dies. I wish I could, sometimes, I wish I could believe that God is actually this God, a God who points and directs good things to good people, bad things to bad people. But that theology falls apart because bad things happen to the good and good things happen to the bad. That theology of God being the chess player falls apart. And that's where Job was. Job said, God, you aren't a God of clarity. You are not a God that says, I will reward good behavior and I will punish bad behavior, at least not in any scheme of the things that we can see. God created a world where humans chose poverty for some, famine for some, chose to sell sex and healthcare and politics and freely take resources out of the earth. Job's friends reacted. That kind of question, that kind of ambiguity is anxiety producing. And so they say, Job, this is all your fault. If you could just toe the line, we could be more comfortable. Job could have flipped it around on them. Job could have said, your religion is wrong. There is no God. Job could have flipped it around on them and said, I'm going to make sure that what happened to me happens to you. Job, though, stayed curious. In all of his other emotions, he also was curious. Why, God? I'm not stopping talking to you, God. Why, God? I'm going to now read from Walter Brueggemann. Walter Brueggemann is a biblical scholar, in particular the Old Testament. prophets and the Psalms. I look forward to exploring the prophets next year with Walter Brueggemann on video and with you in person. He has made a video series with a friend, Tim Scorer. And so we're going to get to know him. But first, I want you to hear what he chose to conclude his reflection on the book of Job. He chose a theologian, Gutierrez, I think is how it's said. Inspired by the experience of his own innocence, Job bitterly criticized the theology of temporal retribution that was being maintained in his day and expounded by his friends. Temporal retribution, an eye for an eye, good things happening to good people, bad to bad, bad people being punished, good people being rewarded in the here and the now. But Job was right to criticize it. But his challenge doesn't go all the way through. If you see in Job chapter 40, you'll see God rebuking Job because Job remained in the either-or mentality. Either there is a God with retributive justice, or there is no God. And God says, oh, that fence you have set around you, Job. Take it down. Take it down. Run free in my love, for love is for all. I do not hold it back. I visit your world and see you practice retribution, but it is not my language. It is not my response. The Lord is not prisoner of the give it to me and I'll give it to you mentality. Nothing, no human work, however valuable, merits grace. If it did, grace would cease to be grace. Rather, God's love is given to all. God is beyond the language of retribution. God is beyond the reactivity of systems enmeshed with one another. And God holds us, hoping that we will not put fences around our behavior or others, but rather sit, reflect, evaluate, respond, and respond out of our core values, which for Christians are love, hope, for all, including ourselves, compassion, community. I'm going to ask you to continue to do a bit of Kathleen Smith's homework. If you're having trouble noticing, or you've been noticing your anxiety and your reaction, but it's quite a while later, I want you to continue that practice. One of the ways to do this is St. Ignatius Examen, and there actually is an app for that. It's EXAMEN, Examen, spelled funny. The app is, I believe, called A New Examen, and it has about 10 prayers in it, but you don't need it. You can do it yourself. What it is an end of day review. You look at your day and you ask it a question. In this case, you would say, when today did I feel anxious? Scared or tight? Sore tummy or a headache? What was happening in that moment? Who was I with or interacting with in that moment? And how did I act after? Did I flee or fight? Did I freeze or fret? And that is enough to go through your day and notice. Once you come to a place where during the day itself you can notice, as I did the other day when I was walking down my apartment and went, oh, I'm fleeing. And I sat down and I chose how to respond. When you are there, then you may want to try something. Kathleen invites us to write a letter to our anxiety. Give it a name, Dear Alarm Bell, or perhaps you have a favorite TV character who is always alarmed, who is always worried, who is always fretting. And that's who you can name your anxiety after. Might be the doctor from a TV show, perhaps one of those ones that was like, darn it, Jim, I'm not reacting, I'm responding. Well, we want to turn our anxiety into a Spock, the kind who says, even with all of Spock's emotions, he was part human, Spock would still say, fascinating, interesting, curious. So write a letter to your anxiety. Thank it for keeping you safe. Ask it if you could change some of your responses to its alarm. Ask it if it's willing to learn to be a good journalist and get past the headlines. Help it redefine threat. Kathleen Smith has an example of someone who came to her for therapy who was feeling very anxious and threatened because he was no longer successful. Due to a loss of job and a few other things in his life, he just wasn't successful. It was a threat. He was anxious, and to get rid of the anxiety, he was making poor choices, including liquor, isolation, not looking for new jobs. He was having tons of feelings of emotions, sadness, anger, guilt, shame. He chose to ask his anxiety if they could redefine what success meant, because he realized that his definition of success wasn't based on anything he believed in his heart and soul or what his parents taught him. It was actually based on what kind of society said was important. You need a title, a job, a salary, a partner. Ask anxiety if you can change up some of the definitions of alarm in your life. So, for example, during this pandemic time, many people have thought, well, this will mean we're all at home and we're not out doing the things we like to do. We will have free time. And so there's been all this push to learn a new hobby. You should create art. Didn't you know that when Shakespeare was in quarantine due to the plague, he wrote history? An amazing play he wrote. I think it was Lear, but it might have been The Tempest. Oh my gosh, people, if that is the definition of surviving a pandemic, we are all going to fail. So let's change our definition of doing this time in self-isolation well. What if success meant I will shower every day, or perhaps bath? I will eat 3 meals a day. I will eat under 6 cookies. And I will go for a walk at least once a week. If I do those things, I don't need to feel anxious because I have succeeded. If Job's friends had decided that success in friendship is listening to someone and believing their experience and sitting in uncomfortable yuckness of emotion and theology wrestling, they would have succeeded. But instead, they thought success meant making Job feel better, making Job believe that there was a reason, and that reason could be found. They set Job up to fail. But Job thought, my definition of success in this time is to keep in relationship to God. It might be God's fault I am sick. It might not be. But I'm in this relationship with God and I'm not going to give it up just because God does not seem to be the God I understood God to be. God seems to be way bigger than that. What will success mean for you today? How can you let your anxiety know that? How can you respond out of your true values rather than reacting to uncomfortable anxiety? God speaks to us in the storm as well as in peace. May you hear God's voice saying, you are loved. Amen.